Hi everyone, this is John Bengtson. Welcome to Chaplin Days, hosted by the Niles S&A Silent Film Museum. This program explores the surprising details and visual history hidden in the background of Charlie Chaplin's highly personal masterpiece, The Kid. Blending sentiment and comedy with echoes from his impoverished London childhood, Chaplin's first independently produced feature film remains a landmark of early cinema. Chaplin opens the film with a warning of sorts that the story about to unfold is more than a simple comedy. Most of The Kid was filmed on the simple backlot set built at the studio. And if you look closely at the details, you can see, for example, that the policeman, Tom Wilson, his home is there in the background. And while it's not presented this way during the movie, the scene where Charlie flirts with the policeman's wife is filmed right across the street from Chaplin's front step. When filming Payday, Charlie used the same sets for all the nighttime scenes. Here he is with his brother Sid Chaplin. There's the same doorway. And here you can see they moved the portable street lamp across the street. But again, it's the same corner. And then later during Payday, Charlie mistakes this lunch wagon for a trolley. And again, you can see his front step and that archway in the background. And then later during the film, he actually walks by the front step. So all these scenes are tied together. But for some reason, I find it very exciting and very personal to realize that this iconic image, this is perhaps one of the most iconic images in all of film history, and it was filmed clearly, as you can see, on this simple set. And it's such an iconic image that just recently a hotel in Paris has decorated the side of their building with this remarkable image. So Charlie not only filmed most of the scenes on his backlot, but he used real locations too. This is the original campus of Occidental College. And you can see that the east end of the Hall of Letters portrayed the maternity hospital where Edna has her baby. In the 1900s, there were very few universities in Los Angeles, so this was once a very important location. And so it was visited both by President Teddy Roosevelt and by President Taft. But by 1914, the campus moved elsewhere, and the building sort of fell into disrepair. So you can see this entranceway. It seems to be a perfect match, but Edna actually filmed her scenes at the back of the building. And you can go up closely, and you can see the same doorway where she leaves the charity hospital. And Mary Pickford, like I said, the building had been abandoned at that point, so Mary Pickford used it to portray the orphanage for her film Daddy Longlegs, and that was before Chaplin even filmed here. And here's the south side of the building today. You can see that the massive porch has been removed. And here's the western front of the building. And another view of the western front of the building. So remarkably, the building had these beautiful gables, these elaborate gables, and this third floor, but for some reason they were removed. And so today the building is only 2 stories tall. But this aerial view shows the pathway that Edna, when she walks out into the cruel world, that was the pathway that she walked. So out on her own with the baby, Edna, this was a scene cut from later releases of the film, but anyway, she encounters this December-May marriage. And you can see it was very obviously filmed at Chaplin's own studio. For some reason, the doorway and the window were reversed in places. But pulling back, you can see, the studio is now owned by the Jim Henson Company. And Kermit the Frog pays tribute to Charlie. And during another scene that was cut from the film, Edna is distraught about what to do, and she may even be contemplating suicide. And this was filmed on the Colorado Street Bridge in Pasadena. It's a beautiful landmark bridge, but very early on, people would jump from it, and it got the name very early on, a suicide bridge. So you can see they put up a railing to help prevent people from trying to kill themselves. And now they've even put a more elaborate fence to try to protect people. So Edna doesn't know what to do, so she decides to leave her baby in the limousine in front of this mansion, hoping that they'll give the baby a good home. And the mansion, it still stands today. It was at 55 Fremont Place. So these 2 car thieves enter the scene. One was Arthur Salasso, and the other was Albert Austin. And you can see behind them one of the entrance gates. Fremont Place is a gated community, and you can see one of the gate towers there in the background, and that's where Charlie filmed a scene from the Atticlass. And here's one of the entrance gate towers today. And this photo, I think, is from the 1950s, but that generally is where the car was parked. And you can see the entrance gate there behind them. Now, in the very next shot, they get in the car and they drive away from the mansion, but in the very next shot, they are on 8th Street, and they're actually driving back towards the mansion. So here's that view. We're looking east along 8th Street, and that's the back of the house that they're supposed to be driving away from. But further in the background, you can see this home. And that's where Mary Pickford once lived for a year. She rented the house, and it could be that her living there is what put this neighborhood on Chaplin's radar in the first place. But anyway, Mary Pickford's home appears during the scene. So the studio records show that they spent a day filming Edna at Sunset Park. And I've looked closely at the photographs, the details and the fountains, whatever, and I'm not certain whether they filmed at this park or not. But shortly after Chaplin filmed here, they changed the name of the park to Lafayette Park. And what I do know for certain is that is the park that appears in the background during city lights. And in the background on Wilshire Boulevard is this apartment building, the Bryson Apartments, and we'll talk about that later. So Edna suddenly realizes, of course, she wants to keep her baby. She returns to the mansion, and she's shocked to find that the car has been stolen. It's gone. She doesn't know where her baby is. And look at this remarkable photo. The home would later be owned by Muhammad Ali. So it's just remarkable, the history hidden in the background of this film. So this is a view around 1922 or so, looking east. There's the Plaza de Los Angeles, and there's the original Chinatown across the street, and Alameda Street is the main north-south street that ran between the two. It had rail lines. but we'll be discussing this frequently. So it turns out the thieves first discovered the baby in the car. They're near the plaza. But then Arthur leaves the baby on the ground in Hollywood. And then Arthur and Albert get in the car and they drive away back at the plaza. And then Charlie starts his morning promenade, dodging the garbage being thrown out the window. And he finds the baby. And then he runs after Minnie Stearns. I think you forgot something, lady. But of course, it's not her baby. And Charlie doesn't know what to do, so he leaves the baby with the studio records call this actor a legitimate bum, but his name was Dan Dillon. But anyway, Charlie leaves the baby with Dan and he runs off. So this was filmed in Hollywood, but exactly where? So this is looking northwest. There's the corner of Hollywood and Cahuenga, and this was very familiar territory for Charlie. It was at this corner he filmed scenes from Tilly's Punctured Romance with Mabel Normand and Marie Dressler. And then down the street at the former Joint Fire Police Station, it's where he filmed Easy Street. But looking more closely at the alley, east of Cahuenga, this is where Chaplin filmed the opening scene. You can even see where he runs up the alley after leaving the baby with Dan Dillon. So that means the scene where Charlie finds the baby was filmed right in the heart of Hollywood, and that building behind him was built in 1905, and it's still standing. So we know this scene was filmed in Hollywood. So in the very next scene, Dan exits an alley. But again, where was it? Well, if you look closely, there's a sign in the background for a Chinese chair repair shop. And you can actually also see a sign with Chinese characters there on the left. So it turns out this was filmed on Alameda, again near the plaza. So there's another scene with Charlie in Hollywood. And then there's another scene of Dan with the baby. So where was this filmed? And remarkably, you can see there are a couple of girls watching the filming, and you can also see a sign that is in Spanish saying that it's a shoe repair shop. And a bit later in the scene, Minnie Stearns beats Charlie, and it has a 645 address, and that address told me that this couldn't have been filmed near Chinatown. But there's another scene with a broader view, and focusing on the building there in the background, I realized that it matched a scene from Harold Lloyd's movie From Hand to Mouth that was filmed on New High Street. And in fact, in this scene, you can see there's this boarded gateway spanning the two buildings. So Charlie filmed this on New High Street. In that same year, Lyons and Moran filmed a detective comedy, also on New High Street, and they filmed beside the very same doorway. And this is getting pretty deep in the woods, but here are two movies, both over 100 years old, and they filmed by the same doorway. You can see the same screen door, the same pipe. Anyway, to me, it's just fun to be able to find this common connection between these two century-old films. And of course, the building is no longer standing. That's generally what it looks like today. So we know this scene was filmed on New High. And then the police confronts Charlie, and again you can see a girl watching the scene, and he convinces Charlie, the baby's your responsibility. And Charlie finally decides to keep the baby, and that was filmed at the Chaplin studio. So again, we're looking east at the plaza on Alameda Street. So the scene where they first discovered there's a baby in the car was filmed right off of Alameda. And when they make their getaway, they drive into Chinatown on Napier Street. And there's the alley where Dan Dillon walks onto Alameda. So this photo was taken maybe around 1935 or so. City Hall was completed in 1928, so at the time that Chaplin filmed here, it wasn't standing. But you can see that's where the car thieves were standing, and behind them you can see the back of the same building on Lisa Street. And there's where Dan exits the alley. That same little white building is the building beside him, but the alleyway was later filled in with this two-story brick building. But anyway, that's where he exited the alley. So here's another aerial view of the neighborhood. And again, it's remarkable. In one scene, they're walking onto Alameda with Chinese signs in the background. And the very next scene is a few blocks to the north. And that was filmed on New High Street with Spanish signs in the background. So this is a fantastic bird's eye aerial view map of Los Angeles, 1909. It's very detailed. And if you zoom in a little bit, there at the top corner is the plaza. And looking closer, there's the plaza and there's Chinatown to the east. And again, there's New High Street where they filmed. And then south of the plaza is where Dan walked out onto Alameda. But just a few blocks south, there was this remarkable street called Dew Common. So here's the street, and here's a view of it from an early film called Derby Days. It was identified at the Library of Congress, mostly lost. But one of the unique details of the street is it had this triangular building on the west end. And there was also this little alley off to the side. It was called Laborie Lane. But anyway, this viewpoint from the movie helps to put in perspective where Charlie filmed the rooftop chase from the kid. So he's up on the houses on Dew Common Street, and he's looking at Laborie Lane, and he sees the orphanage truck coming along. And then later, when he's fighting with the orphan director on the back of the truck, that's also in Laborie Lane. And remarkably, during the scene, this man pops up and looks over the fence to watch the filming. So here's a broader view of that view east. And at the back, where the Los Angeles River is, there were these giant gas plants. And so that is the Dew Common Street gas plant in the background. And that yellow arrow is Dew Common Street, where Chaplin filmed. This photo doesn't show where he actually filmed the scenes from the kid, but it sort of gives you a sense of the layout. And that gas tank tower, except for City Hall, that gas tank tower was the tallest structure in downtown Los Angeles for decades. But again, this was very familiar territory for Chaplin, because years later he filmed scenes from modern times. Here he's chasing Juana Sutton with a pair of wrenches, but he filmed this on Jackson Street near the Dew Common gas plant. And then later in the movie, the scenes were filmed by the Aliso Street gas plant. So looking east on Ducommon and overlapping the scenes, this was a very popular place for Buster to film as well. So during The Goat, you can see the same building in the background. And then during The Kid, Buster makes a left turn here. And in the background, that house directly behind the Triangle building, with Buster we're looking east and with Charlie we're looking west, but that building behind the Triangle building is the same roof where Charlie is sitting. And you'll notice that the building had this little finial or something on the corner of the roof. So the photo on the left, if you were standing on the roof where that man appears to be standing in the photo to the right, if you're standing where he was standing and had a camera, that's probably where the photographer stood to take the photo on the left. And then during the rooftop chase, you can see that little corner, the rooftop finial there. But that strange triangle building is directly behind Charlie, but he's sliding down that roof. And then here, there's a view. It's further east down Laborie Lane, but you can actually see the end of the street. So during the chase, when Charlie and the orphan director are fighting on the truck actually makes a right turn from Laborie Lane onto Hewitt. You can actually see the Hewitt street sign in the background. And you can even see the same shed, the same open doors on the shed in both shots. So this was a really incredible filming location, but it was all torn down around 1923, which is too bad because, as I mentioned, this little neighborhood at Ducommon and Alameda was Buster Keaton's favorite place to shoot, both for Cops and The Goat. He filmed about 20 different points of view shots for these two films at this one location. And it was Buster's favorite place to shoot in all of Los Angeles. So now we're looking north, and again, there's the plaza. And the alley north of the plaza was Olvera Street, and Sanchez was to the south. And then the north-south streets were Main Street and Los Angeles Street, and there was this little 1 block long street called Arcadia. So Charlie has knocked out the orphan director from the truck, and in this scene the truck makes a right turn from behind the Baker building onto Arcadia, and you can actually see behind Charlie some buildings on Sanchez Alley. And during a Keaton film, Neighbors, a policeman is dragging Buster up Arcadia. And you notice there's a De Paris sign they're painting on the building. It was the side of the Hotel de Paris. So Buster walked along the street and he walked right into that cement post. There was a giant arc lamp up there before they had modern street lamps. But Buster walked into that cement post. And taking a broader view, if you were on Los Angeles Street looking up Arcadia towards Main Street, you'd get this view of where Charlie made the right turn onto Arcadia. And then later, Buster filmed another scene from Cops running toward the camera, running down Arcadia. So there was a lot of history in this little neighborhood. So looking at this aerial photo again, to get your bearings, there's where Charlie makes the right turn onto Arcadia. And a couple years earlier, during Police, Charlie is very deftly picking the pocket of the man who's robbing him, and that was filmed on Sanchez Alley. And then a bit further north, during Easy Street, Eric Campbell chases Charlie around the corner from Los Angeles Street onto the plaza. And then just across Alameda Street on Alameda Street is where Charlie filmed Caught in a Cabaret. And then this broad view shows this is a major building in Chinatown at the corner of Juan and Appa Plaza. And if you pay attention to that fire plug, this is the corner where Jackie Coogan and Tom Wilson had one of their amusing scenes. And if you line up the different shots, you can see how the doorway and the windows line up behind them. It really lines up almost perfectly. But then the scene where Charlie's trying to get rid of Jackie, he doesn't want the cop to know that they're working together. But that funny scene was also filmed at the corner of this building. Now again, this is very familiar territory for Charlie because he also filmed this scene from Police. He's deciding whether he should steal that drunken man's pocket watch. But it's filmed right there at the Chinwu building. And now we get a wider view. So here we're looking west down Appa Plaza Street from Juan Street and getting a closer view. At the end of the movie, Tom Wilson picks up Charlie, tosses him in a police car, and that was right on Appa Plaza. You can see the matching building there behind them. And down the street on that porch was where Charlie filmed another scene from Caught in a Cabaret. And that building also appears in D.W. Griffith's Broken Blossoms. So here's an aerial photograph. They took many photographs of Chinatown before they tore it down to build the Union train station. But just to get your bearings, there's the doorway behind Jackie Coogan. And then down the street is where Charlie filmed Caught in a Cabaret. And pulling back a little and going a little further north, you can see during Easy Street, Charlie runs down Olvera Street. So the view of Charlie is looking north. And here's a modern view of that same spot looking north today. But of course, it's on Olvera Street where Charlie and Jackie are reunited. And of course, the scene where they're reunited remains one of the most emotionally powerful scenes in all of cinema history. And remarkably, it was filmed right here on Olvera Street at a place you can still visit. So Olvera Street was just a rundown, working class alley, but someone had the brilliant idea to fix it up a little, and they turned it into a Mexican marketplace. And so it opened in 1930, and it's been a popular tourist attraction ever since. But you can see how the movie matches up exactly with this vintage photograph. And here Charlie's chasing the orphan truck driver south down Olvera, and those trees behind him are the trees on the plaza. So in this view, most of the buildings are relatively intact in this view, looking at on Olvera Street where Charlie filmed. But here's this photo one final time, and I focused on this photo so often because these are among all the places where Charlie filmed. He also filmed Modern Times a little further away and Undue Comment a little further south. But this, Charlie grew up on impoverished London streets, and it's remarkable that he filmed so many scenes in the lower working class, poor neighborhoods of Los Angeles, in Chinatown and where Mexican workers lived. So this neighborhood resonated with Charlie. It was familiar to him. It was a place where he liked to film, and it just plays such a huge part in his films. So it's remarkable that he was so familiar with these streets and filmed there so frequently. And brace yourself, here's how it looks today. The freeway on the right cuts through Arcadia Street, which no longer exists. The red tile roof is the Union train station that replaced Chinatown. And then there are all these modern high-rise buildings. So it's really staggering what a century will do. I'm sure Charlie wouldn't recognize any of this. But again, looking back, this was the neighborhood that was familiar to Charlie 100 years ago when he was making his movies. So very quickly, jumping back to Hollywood, I mentioned that the opening scenes were filmed on this alley. So here's another view. This is looking to the northeast. There's Hollywood and Cahuenga. But anyway, along this humble alley, as we've seen, it's where Charlie Chaplin filmed, the opening scenes from The Kid. But it also turns out on the west end of the alley is where Buster filmed this stunt from Cops, where he grabs a passing car one-handed. And then on the east end of the alley, the back of that building portrays the department store where Harold worked in Safety Last. So Harold filmed many, many scenes from Safety Last there as well. So it turns out the three kings of comedy each made a masterpiece film at the same alley. Each film has been inducted into the National Film Registry of the Library of Congress. And this is an absolutely unique 6-in-1 filming location. And we hope someday the city of Los Angeles will recognize this history by giving the alley a name. So wrapping up, here's a view looking east from Wilshire Boulevard. This is probably taken around 1930 or so. And then in the background is the Bryson apartment building. It's still standing, but that's where Charlie filmed one of his earliest films for the Keystone Studio. He has his eyes closed, and he doesn't realize he's feeling Roscoe Arbuckle's tummy. But anyway, it's a funny scene. But anyway, this was a familiar neighborhood for Charlie. And believe it or not, this grand home on the corner is Edna Proviance's home. At the conclusion of The Kid. And it's interesting, I don't know if the lighting was better or if it was a sort of a commentary, but when the police take Charlie to Edna's house, they take him to the side entrance. He doesn't go to the front door, they take him to the side entrance. And it's kind of threatening. The cops has a hold of him by the collar. It's not really sure how it's going to end. It still seems kind of tense. But then, of course, they're joyfully reunited. The cop is laughing. And of course, we have the happy ending. They obviously have some domestic issues to figure out for the next day and the remaining years of their lives. But the movie ends on this really happy note where they're reunited. Anyway, it's a wonderful, touching scene to conclude the movie. So I want to mention just very briefly If you'd like to learn more about Charlie's films or other silent movie locations, I have tours and blogs and whatever on my blog post, silentlocations.com. And there's also, this link will also take you to a YouTube video that further explains the Chaplin-Keaton-Lloyd Alley. But with that, that concludes our program, and I want to thank you very much for your attention. This was really a lot of fun to do. So thank you once again.